All right, listen up, okay? It's been a long time since I've done something this strictly informational, but I really need to talk about this, okay? Because I'm tired of seeing people talk about it and I can't do it anymore, all right? I want to talk about the debt limit. Are there other videos you can watch on YouTube that'll explain this to you? Yes. Will you be able to look at my face while having it explained to you in these other videos? Yes, as long as you have their audio playing in a separate tab, but you're looking at me during that. So if you want to, you could do that. Mute me and go listen to them. They'll probably know more than me because they're all a bunch of neoliberals. They're all smart. They're all smarty pantses, but you can look at my face, whatever. You know, you do what you want to do, okay? Look, the debt limit discourse is happening again. For those of you who don't know, I swear to God, I am going to get a subscription to the Washington Post. So for those of you who don't know, okay, here's the way it works. They're talking about the debt limit again. So basically, in the United States, we've got a really, really, really cool system. Okay, so the every year a budget is drafted. Okay, by Congress. It goes through a billion processes. Whatever they sign, it propose, sign, whatever, signed to law. Okay, you've got a budget. The budget is now happening. Great. The budget is exacting and precise, even though a lot of money gets lost in it, especially to the Pentagon, all right? The budget also seems to keep increasing, especially to the Pentagon. Who could have guessed? You know, whatever. Now, once you've signed the budget into law, you got to follow it, which means spending money. That's how budgets work. And while following your legal obligation to spend money in accordance with that budget, you might run up against a wall, you know? What wall, I hear you ask? The wall at the southern border? No, my friends, this wall is the debt ceiling. It is the limit on the total amount of money the U.S. government is allowed to borrow, the total amount of debt we're allowed to be in. And past that point, once you go past that amount, you can no longer borrow money, which means in practice, because you've already run up to that point in the budget and are currently borrowing money, you can't spend money. Does anyone remember that time a couple years ago where all the parks shut down for a little while because Congress was having another kerfuffle about raising the debt ceiling? You remember that? Like, there was a little period of time during which, like, everything shut down. Here, let me see. Debt limit, parks shut down. This was one of the worst debt limit kerfuffles in recent memories. At least I don't remember one that was more I don't remember one that got to that point when I was younger, at least. See, now I try to Google debt limit park shutdown, and now they're just talking about the current debt limit fight. Always and always and always. They talk about this. Look, here's an NPR article, okay? This is from May 2nd. It's a chart on the U.S. debt. Where's the word that I saw in the Google preview? Give it to me. There it is. The fight over the debt ceiling could sink the economy. This is how we got here. All you have to do, every time the January 2019 ceiling fight was the longest government shutdown in history. Yeah, okay, there we go. Remember, it was the longest in history. It was a long, long time. Debt and deficit aren't the same. No, they're not the same. Every time this discourse happens, okay? To be clear, the debt limit fight, this fight over, like, will they, won't they raise the debt ceiling to allow the government to continue to borrow money, to spend money to fulfill its budgetary promises, this is a completely artificial, yeah, it's theater. It's an artificial battle. All it is people leveraging an inevitable consequence of a budget they already signed into law to try to get some other thing passed. This argument over, oh, well, you know, we've spent so much money, we can't raise the debt ceiling further. The people saying that voted on the budget that led to this. There's no, like, this isn't surprising at all. This is like a completely, it's not even expected. It's inevitable. When you sign the budget, you can literally see, well, how much money is going to get spent? Where's the current debt ceiling? Okay, if we vote on this budget, if we vote yes on this budget, it will hit the debt ceiling here. That's why people know this. That's why this happens every single year. It's a feature, not a bug. It is one of the most overt, if not the most overt, examples of political theatrics in American politics. You know how, why did I hit that button? You know how, like, edgy teenagers talk about how, like, the left and the right are the same, and how, you know, like all of government is just this like petty theater that's meant to distract the people. I generally disagree with that. I think that there are very complicated socio-political forces that motivate political action. Even when politicians are consistently dishonest, it's very rarely as simple as they're all playing a game. In this instance, it is actually that simple. It is completely and fully that simple. So people say, well, why don't we rein in the budget? You know, why don't we stop spending so much? To which I say, you know, of course, okay, will you be the one to vote on cutting the Pentagon's budget in half, which none of them will do, so this is going to keep happening. But I also want to say, you know, people get really mad about our debt. You know, oh, we're spending so much money. Oh, the number is so high. $30.9 trillion. Oh, it's so sad. A country having debt is not a bad thing. I know that sounds crazy, but it really depends on what country you are and what kind of debt it is. So to be clear, sometimes when a country's in debt, it's like a little baby country. Who are they in debt to? They're in debt to us. Is that bad for them? Yes, it's very bad. We will install a fascist dictator to ensure compliance with our business interests. But when debt is held by a powerful country like us, especially a country that, as is the case with us, represents the global reserve currency, the US dollar, the global reserve currency, meaning that we are literally the like base level against which the economies of every country on earth are compared. You know, remember the 2008 financial crisis, which ended up collapsing like the world economy, even though it was about American investment in American mortgages? It was gambling on mortgage loans in America, but then it collapses the world economy. Reserve currency. We are the economy. And as a consequence of that, it means that every country in the world is invested in the strength of the US dollar. There is no country that wants to ruin America's economy. Sometimes they might posture, like China sometimes does this, trade war gesturing, but in reality, they don't. Collapsing the world economy will always collapse the global economy. There's no localized, America. I guess, like, yeah, Russia might be one of the few exceptions, purely because Russia is so sanctioned and so like isolated that it's can't, like, it's already dying, you see. Russia having an interest in collapsing our economy doesn't mean it wouldn't hurt them. It would. It just means that, you know, they're already dying and they want to lash out at us in the last second. Cuba, we're already embargoing. Okay, you know what I mean, the global economy. It's not a good process for anyone to see the US dollar tank. And the United States government having debt actually works to our benefit in this respect, you know? Because, first of all, a lot of the debt that the U.S. government carries, here at the end of the chart it says $30.9 trillion, that's a lot of money. A lot of the debt that we carry are government organizations to themselves. If you can imagine, I have, see, it's this is the government shaking its own hands, you see? The government isn't just one institution. It's made up of dozens and dozens, hundreds and hundreds of organizations operating at local, state, and federal levels, cooperating, collaborating, spending, promising. A lot of the debt that we owe is money owed to ourselves. The exact nuance of how you can be in debt to yourself is kind of complicated. Imagine it as a dorm house that has, like, I don't know, 3,000 roommates in it, and all of them are constantly borrowing money from each other, spending it around. And you can have a situation where people in that house collectively are thousands of dollars in debt to each other, even though if all the debts were actually resolved, you could pass one $100 bill around a bunch of times and end up, like, fixing everything. You understand what I mean? If a chain of 5 people are in debt to each other, this one owes this one 100, this one owes this one 100, this one owes this, blah, 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 like that, and you gave a $100 bill to this person, they pay off them, who pays off them, who pays off them, who pays off them. And with 100, you've solved $500 in debt. See? So the total amount that we owe, the debt number, not actually representative of the real material amount of money that we're missing in our system. You understand what I'm talking about? That's one. For two, the fact that our country is in debt is a benefit when it comes to global relations. So, to be clear, not all of the debt that we owe is to ourselves. We also owe debt to other countries, to other corporations. Why is this a good thing? Well, it means that those countries really want our government to be okay, for the same reason that a bank only wants to loan money to people who have a high credit score. They don't want to hand money over to us and add to our debt if they're under the impression that we're incapable of paying it back. So for that reason, the fact that we have a high debt is both an indication in high national trust in the stability of our country and an incentive for other countries to continue to promote the health of American businesses and our economy. You understand? It's exactly the same as like with a bank and a person who takes out a loan, right? You want this relationship to be defined primarily by trust that both will fulfill their ends of the financial obligation. And the more trust there is, the more people will be willing to loan. Banks will give you higher credit card ceilings if you've proven that you can, like if you're like a little baby high school student, maybe your credit card has a $500 ceiling, whereas as an adult it can be $10, $20, $30,000. If you're really, really wealthy, it can be question mark, question mark, question mark, which is, hey, the United States is really wealthy, so that's kind of where we are, right? So the question is, right, like, okay, so it promotes trust broadly. It doesn't always represent the actual amount of like missing money in the economy. All the same, like, is there any harm? Like, what harm might come of this? What harm might come of this high debt? Well, to be honest with you guys, the biggest threat that our high debt represents is the potential threat of a conservative populist defaulting on that debt, which would collapse the world economy for the reasons I've talked about, or with this interminable debt ceiling discourse, which is used every year as a political bludgeon to push forward or threaten to push forward any number of issues on with leverage that everyone agreed would exist in the near future, and consign themselves to have to deal with the laws they passed previously. Nothing here is unexpected. Why not just make it infinite then? That's a great question, Crab Crown. Why don't you go over to the Capitol building and you go over to the House floor and you ask them, hey, you do this every year and it's all inevitable. Why not just make it infinite? Please, I'm actually asking you to go do that. Please go do that. Convince them. Change their mind. Yeah, it's January 7th, okay? Except it's just us trying to raise the debt ceiling to infinity. Seriously, our national debt really is not that bad of a thing. It's not like we're missing payments or like being charged exorbitant interest. Debt within a country is just not the same as a debt as an individual. It's completely different. Yeah, Annie has a good point. Our debt to GDP ratio is not that bad either, because we may have an exorbitantly high debt, but we also have a massive GDP. We have an enormously productive economy. You see? Look at that. Wow, these numbers sure do be going up. Like $10,000 a second. Well, that's money for you. Crazy, huh? Yeah, Canada has a higher debt to GDP ratio. France has a massively higher one. My goodness. Look at that. Greece, well, we could have told you that. Look, we do spend a lot of money. If you want to cut down on the money we spend, which I'm fine with, by the way, but just to be clear, I'm just saying debt isn't that bad of a thing on a national level. I'm not saying that you can spend money infinitely. I'm not a, what are those guys called? The ones who keep emailing me, telling me to let them talk to my stream for 4 hours? The MMT. I'm not a modern monetary theorist, okay? I haven't bought into that, cult just yet. I do think that there are limits to how much a government can reasonably spend before you start to have trouble. I mean, that has happened. Oh yeah, Japan's economy is not looking good at all. Whew. You understand? If you want to cut down on the amount we spend, you want tax hikes, and you want to lower military spending, and also on a local level police spending. That would be nice. Japan's economy has been stagnant since the 90s. Guys, you know how lefties are always saying line go up? You know, they're making fun of the idea that a high GDP is representative of, the public good. So I want to be clear. Having a high GDP is not representative of the public good necessarily, but it is good that the line go up. Under capitalism, Investors invest in businesses with the expectation that their investment gets a return, meaning that the default state of a capitalist economic system is growth. Growth is the expectation, growth is the necessity. A capitalist economy that stagnates is actually doing worse than stagnating. For a capitalist economy to not grow, what you're essentially saying to future investors is, yeah, you could invest in a business, but the odds of it actually giving you a return are, and that means they're not going to invest. Without investors, the entire system of trade and commerce doesn't really work. Are there problems with capitalism? Not at all. Nobody has discovered one. Nobody has written a 3-part book on issues with capitalism, okay? We have what we have. That's it. That's all you do. Hold on. But I want to point out, while we're talking about the debt, this right here is the growth of the GDP of the United States. Now, you might notice something interesting. There's Japan down there, which has been stagnating since the mid-90s. Seriously stagnating, like properly stagnating. Look at that. China's been exploding, largely because it's a nation of 1.5 billion people that has been rapidly industrializing since the turn of the millennium. You might notice that the United States has engaged in a consistent exponential rate of growth, despite the fact that we are a post-industrialized nation. Isn't that interesting? The reason for this is, of course, because America has an incredibly strong economy. Here's another group of 3. There's the United Kingdom. Been stagnant since 2007. Hey, guys, what happened in 2008? Oops, sorry. America's economy is the world economy. Oops. Vosh, why are you doing line go up? Don't you mock tech bros for this? Line go up does not mean that things are getting better or that things couldn't be getting better faster. Line go up does mean, however, that we are meeting the base requirement for economic health under a capitalist system, which, as you can see, India is growing quite quickly. Mexico is growing, albeit slowly. The United Kingdom is flatlined, though. The UK. People sometimes group together the United States with Europe as though we're kind of like part of the same hegemon, which is true culturally in some respects, but economically, the United States is a beast of its own. Like, we're really strong. People don't appreciate that. People talk about the death of American industry, or, you know, oh, we're all going to collapse. The American economy is faltering. Well, it might falter a little bit sometimes, but look at this. There's Germany doing relatively, and I say relatively well, France and Italy. See, the chart goes from 1960 up to here. You've got this waggling. Notice how they all waggle on the same line. They're all EU countries. They're pretty economically tied together. Again, compare that to the United States. Look at this. If you're an investor, if you're somebody who wants to make money by investing in an existing business and stealing the surplus value of your laborers, the ones underneath you, this is a good line. Invest here, pay out here. Invest here, pay out here. Don't invest here, then pay out here. Invest here, then pay out here. Yeah. You understand, don't you? What about this line? What about these lines? You understand? We're a unique country. The fact that we're this economically strong gives us the ability, gives us the privilege to be largely unconcerned with debt. Really, like, this is a America thing. If we were Ecuador, currently undergoing a constitutional crisis, if we were Turkey, if we were, God forbid, Russia, if we were any other country on earth with a few exceptions, I think that worrying about the debt and deficit would be a lot more reasonable, because those other countries don't have the pull that we have. They don't have the strength. But we do. So when you hear all this worry wording about the deficit, the debt ceiling, all that crap, just remember, the only real threat to your well-being as an American citizen is if some jackass decides to default or postures so hard during the yearly debt limit crisis that they end up shutting down the government for a while. You get me? I've talked about stuff like this before, but I haven't really centralized it. But I think it's important that people fully understand the, I guess, lack of precarity of the situation. Just not that big of a deal. Again, mind you, if we got our spending under control, that would be good. I would like it if we could allocate more money in our budget towards more humanitarian concerns, like, you know, literally anything but the military. That would be super, super great. Keep in mind, though, that considering the fact that we're already, like, pretty committed to outspending our intake every year from taxes, you could just add on to our budget with more humanitarian stuff without actually changing the military budget. Like, the line for our debt is already going up really quickly. So if it went up a little bit faster, but also people had healthcare, you know, I'm just saying, you know, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Hypothetically. How bad would defaulting be? It would be the end of the world. It would be the end of the world. GDP growth doesn't mean the economy is good. Aussie Boo, I am not saying that GDP growth means the economy is good. I'm saying you're fulfilling a core component of economic stability under capitalism. Probably the most important component from a purely economic perspective. I'm not saying that is the entirety of the economy. The economy is complicated. I'm not saying line go up means everything is fine, obviously. America's line go up doesn't seem to be reflecting very much when it comes to, say, cost of living or the average wage of a worker, does it? I'm not saying that line go up translates into benefits for the working class. I'm only saying line go up means that you're fulfilling a baseline level of stability under capitalism, something that very few countries can consistently meet. We can. Not everyone can. Not everyone's as cool as us, you know? You all get me. Right? You all get me, don't you? You mind comparing the US to Canada? Oh, sure. Here. Canada, GDP. I think they're doing well, but not as well as us. Yeah, see? They're following the same curve as Mexico. Maybe because of NAFTA? That's interesting. I didn't think the curve would be this similar with both. You might notice the distinct lack of a beautiful exponential line that we have. See the blue line here? Notice how it's less pretty than our line? Notice how our line is a lot prettier? NAFTA is dead. I know, but it's just interesting that they have the same... Just speculating. Yeah, India is growing quite quickly right now. India is going to be the next big superpower, I think. 2008 f***ed up the world. Yeah. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yes, Aussie Boo. Exactly. Okay, I feel like this has been instructive. Maybe to some people. I always enjoy it. Also, for the person who said that Turkey's line going up means that they're, like, doesn't necessarily mean their economy's going good, I will note their line didn't go up forever. Turkey's economy exploded back at the turn of the millennium, probably because of, I don't know, let's say 9/11. And then, I didn't know Iran's economy had this much of a dip. Iran, in 2020, Iran's economy was a third the size that it was a decade ago. That's insane. Yeah, line go down. But yes, if we defaulted on our debts, it would be the end of the world. I cannot overstate the unimaginable economic harm that would be done. It would basically, it would basically just destroy all things. A black hole would open in the center of the earth and swallow us all. It wouldn't be good. Wouldn't be good. Don't recommend it personally. Why? Okay. Remember the Great Depression? The causes of the Great Depression are complicated, which is my code way of saying I don't remember. But the Great Depression got really bad when everyone tried to do a bank run. See, everyone heard that the banks were running out of money and that the economy was in trouble, which means that people lined up at the bank to withdraw their money before it disappeared. This was before money in banks was federally insured. That happened because of the Great Depression, meaning that if you saved up your nest egg of like $200, which back then would have been kind of a nest egg, and then the bank run happened, you get to the front of the line, and they're out of money, you just don't have $200. You don't have hypothetical 200. You don't have IOU 200. The bank's out of money. You have nothing. You're out. Now, this caused the largest global economic crisis in modern history. And it was largely because of a fundamental lack of trust and reliability in the banks. The U.S. defaulting on its debt would be that times 10. 20, even. I can't even describe how bad it would be. It would be the fundamental, the ground under our feet. Matter would literally fall apart. We would just dissolve into quarks. It would be very bad. Why would cons want to default on the debt? In reality, defaulting on the entirety of the debt would be impossible. I fully believe that if any politician genuinely tried to default on the debt, they would be disappeared within an hour. I'm not saying that like facetiously. I actually mean that the consequences of defaulting on the debt would be so destabilizing to everyone, including the wealthy, that I fully believe they would immediately get hit with the heart attack gun. I completely believe that, like unironically. So I don't think it's ever going to happen. However, sometimes populists go sicko mode. They have a silly moment. They feel a bit silly one day. You know, I don't actually think that's going to happen. Now, the real life, like maybe equivalent bad thing that could happen would be just not raising the debt ceiling, so the government shutdowns just get longer and longer, and that would be really, really bad. But it wouldn't be as bad. It would still be really bad, but it wouldn't be as bad. By the way, that whole process that I talked about with investment and line go up, this is the primary reason that Marxists say that capitalism is doomed to fail, that, you know, the seeds of capitalism destruction are sown by its blah, 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 blah. The tendency towards expected unrelenting growth under capitalism creates an effect where wealth is consolidated primarily in the hands of the wealthy, and without any kind of subsequent distributive system, you know, you lead to class antagonism, which we have and are continuing to get. Were these your piss thoughts? Well, I just wanted to say, do you think infinite growth is impossible? Well, the economy can grow infinitely, because infinite growth in the economy is an abstract concept. It's a relativistic concept, you know? An economy growing from 1 to 2 and it growing from 100 to 200 aren't necessarily different. It's just a frame of reference, you know? There's always a way to go up in terms of people's estimation and evaluation of the strength and value and so on and so forth of whatever they're looking at. However, the problem is that this, here, look, I'll draw it really quickly, okay? Okay, you've heard about these people called the bourgeoisie, right? Real bad people, real nasty people. Look, it's a little bit like this, okay? I'm going to try to do this as simply as I can because it's a complicated concept, okay? So let's imagine you have a system where you have the exponential growth curve of the United States in terms of GDP, you know. Things keep growing, blah, 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 right? Okay. So you have businesses. Businesses are great. Now, the people who work at these businesses are getting, I don't know, what do you want, $20 an hour? 15? I don't know. They're getting something, okay? Probably not enough. Definitely not enough. So they're getting that amount. So the people who work down here, even the managers, mind you, okay? The humble proletariat. And then up here, you have investors. Now, it is the responsibility and job and hope of the investor to choose a business to invest in, and that business's value will increase, right? So you can choose this, you can choose this one, you can choose two of them. Hey, crazy world, right? Free country. For the wealthy, at least. But you have to choose. So, you know, why would you do this? Well, the reason you do this is because you want to buy this, or we'll keep it simple. You know, let's say you fully buy this business when it's worth $10, and then later, because it's grown and is better, it's now worth $30, and you have now made money. Isn't that great? Now, the problem is, of course, that even though the economy is kind of abstract, we live in a material world, which means that there is always a finite number of resources, a finite amount of land, and that means that invariably one corporation doing better and better will push out other corporations. This is the tendency towards monopoly, right? As a corporation grows larger, it can benefit more from large-scale production, the economy of scale, It can use underhanded business practices that corporations have used for literally all of human history to make sure that their competitors can't stand on even footing. They can buy politicians. They can lobby in their favor. They can win no-bid contracts, blah, 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 blah. And you can have a corporation do really well. And what that means is that these corporations go out of business. Now, here's the problem, okay? Let's say these corporations go out of business and this one buys all of its competitors' land, resources, whatever. We can use this as an abstract representation for their growth. The other businesses are now all owned by one person, this investor. This investor now owns this entire industry, right? Now, here's the thing, okay? Where has wealth gone? Like, what has happened to wealth? Well, the people working down here in these businesses don't make more money. Generally, when your business gets bought out by another one, that doesn't mean you get a pay increase. If anything, you're likely to get fired. As the economy of scale increases, the efficiency of production increases, which means that it's likely that not as many people will be needed for the same number of jobs, right? Some stuff can be automated depending on the industry. Some stuff might be consolidated. Economic inefficiencies might be addressed by consolidating two businesses into one. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, a lot of headway that can be cut down. So where's the money coming from, right? Well, the money's happening up here. This guy is now crazy rich, right? Like the other, before he had enough money to invest in the one business, but now this guy is the sole owner of this entire industry. So this guy's wealth has gone up massively. Now, whose wealth has gone down? Well, the wealth that has been lost, the people who have lost out are... Well, wait, hold on. Hold on a second. If the workers who work in the businesses that got bought have roughly the same wage, again, we're very simplifying this. Their businesses were bought, but let's say the workers are kept, if anything. So they're not losing or gaining money. Okay? And the investors who previously owned these businesses were bought off, meaning that the people who used to control these businesses, say the owner of this one, the owner of that one, whatever, well, they were paid for the business. They weren't forcibly conquered, right? So these people walked away with millions. They're doing fine. So where's the money coming from? I'll wait until I see the answer in chat. Money is made up. That's true. I do notice, though, that there are a lot of different answers in chat, which I think illustrates the complexity of the question. Since I'm simplifying things, in real life, there would be many, many factors, but I'll focus on the ones that I find most important for this example. So, for one, the increasing efficiency of consolidation under a monopoly means that in all likelihood, a greater proportion of surplus labor value is going to be skimmed off the labor of all the workers. But maybe not by a huge amount, certainly not enough to justify the massive wealth this person now represents. In a publicly traded economy, the real wealth now comes from an evaluation of this person. On the stock market, this monopoly business, this industry, is now worth far more than all the individual businesses were worth on their own, because those individual businesses weren't growing and expanding the way that this one is. Now that we have one monopolizing industry that has grown enormously, that has demonstrated drive and ambition and expansion, the stock evaluation in this company will escalate massively, because investors will look at this this process of growth and decide, oh, this is on the up and up. I now have the ability to invest in this. I can get in on this. You understand? Does everyone follow that? What we're really talking about when it comes to wealth in a publicly traded corporation is however many stocks this investor has are now worth more because there is a higher evaluation of the corporation that they hold stocks in. This is why CEOs and the like are paid in stocks for the most part, shares or whatever. Because that means that their good performance in a corporation will positively incentivize them to, because their shares will be worth more money. Right? I feel like chat's not as interested in this as I am. To be honest, I'm not thinking at all right now. Okay, never mind. Maybe we'll talk about this later. It's okay. I think it's interesting. Okay, listen. No, I'm into it. Okay, listen, let me wrap this up really quick. Then we'll move on, okay? I'll wrap this up, okay? So far, the system that I'm describing right now is one of concentrating inequality, where the performance of these businesses, usually due to the work and behavior of ordinary workers and managers, leads to a massive increase in the evaluated wealth of the investor, the initial investor who controls everything. Because this system leads to no general increase in wealth down here and a ton of general wealth increase up here, we're talking about increasing consolidation. Now, the problem is that the process that I'm describing, this process of investment leading to higher returns, leading to greater growth, leading to greater wealth inequality, this is recursive. That means that this process can happen over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe this business goes defunct. Maybe it all falls apart. Maybe someone else buys it out. Maybe there's a merger. Maybe something bad happens. Maybe something good happens. But the process continues, which means that even if line goes up continuously, that's a very good curve that I just drew. I'm very proud of that. Thank you. Even if the line goes up continuously, you know, maybe the investors are happy, but the process of consolidation continues infinitely. What this means, of course, is that relative to the overall amount of money in the economy, the working class controls a smaller share. We're talking about a rate of growth that reflects economic health for the ultra-wealthy, for people who have the ability to take advantage of this line going up, but workers don't. The only thing it really guarantees for workers is economic activity, which does not necessarily mean well-paid economic activity, does not necessarily mean accessible economic activity. It just means economic activity, right? And the fact that this consolidation continues on and on and on and on means that a smaller proportion of the wealth will be controlled by the workers, which means that class inequality will rise, which means that, hey, people will start writing textbooks on socialism again. It also trends towards the tendency for the rate of profit to fall, because the less money is held by the workers, the less they can actually buy any of the stuff that gets produced in an economy where costs are scaled to take into account the total amount of money moving within it. You know, this process of economic accumulation doesn't have no effect on inflation, after all. Inflation is a continuous process, and if no wealth gains are happening in the lower classes, that means that eventually, hey guys, heard of, I don't know, cost of living increases? Things like this lead to economic turmoil without any kind of external system to address this cycle of reinvestment. And because there's less money in the hands of the working class, that means that in some industries, you're actually going to see this recursive economic downturn because people have less money to spend. Guys, how many articles have you seen about millennials ruining X industry? Well, what happened there? Millennials have less money than Gen X, who has less money than the boomers, who has less money, so on and so forth, meaning that they weren't given enough money, like as a class, as a generation, to participate in some of these more superfluous industries. Which means that, in a way, you know, class inequality has brought about the downfall of industries that created, to an extent, class inequality. Does everyone understand this? Does this... This is important stuff, by the way. This is like the fundamental... Yeah. Didn't Vosh just describe the boom-bust cycle? No. The boom-bust cycle is specifically about like economic health and reinvestment. What I'm talking about is a general rate for both profits to fall and for inequality to rise. This does not stop happening without upheaval. The upheaval can be the introduction of like a welfare state, like FDR after the Great Depression, for example, which was the apex of economic inequality for many people. Passed laws that would try to like bridge the gap, which worked to an extent. There are, after all, things you can do to keep this cycle from happening. One of which is unionization. Because if you have strong unions, especially sectoral unions, meaning that they would encompass the entire industry even before they're all owned by one person, you can now bargain for a higher wage that you feel is proportional to the overall economic growth of your business or your industry, meaning that wealth is more fairly distributed between the ultra-wealthy and the workers, meaning that you decrease the severity of these negative economic tendencies. Of course, ultimately, the real problem here is that there is even a distinct cycle of investment. This whole problem is caused by the turbulent economic winds of the investor, of the bourgeoisie, for whom it is in their interest to manipulate the structure of the economy in such a way it benefits them with no necessary benefit to those beneath them. Because remember, economic stagnation is economic loss to the investor. So it's not even a matter of them being evil. And Marx was clear on this, by the way. This isn't bourgeoisie bad, proletariat good. There are good and bad people on an individual moral level on both sides. These are inevitable consequences of the nature of these classes and that which is afforded both of them. The distinction between the worker and the owner causes this rift, this cycle, which can be amended, which can be mitigated, which can be made less harsh through all manner of legislation or circumstance, but the cycle continues. And, that's why some radical people suggested that, maybe it would be better if you actually consolidated the worker and the owner class into one group. Say, for example, an entire nation of people who own that which they work. Say, if you were to, I don't know, take the means of production and ensure that they were in the hands of those who actually, work. And then you would kind of fix this problem, right? Because if every worker, was part of a collective, the ownership block of the business they worked at, you wouldn't have this disparate investment cycle because you own the business you work at, right? Some corporations do a version of this where they give shares out with your paycheck, but that's not quite the same because even if you benefit proportionally from or somewhat proportionally from the shares that you're given. For one, it's not anywhere near proportional to the labor value of your work. If it was, then there would be no money left for the investor. And two, it doesn't give you any actual control over the business. Control is important. Public ownership on its own is not enough. Public ownership on its own is nice. It's preferable to not public ownership. But public ownership on its own is just a payment scheme without actual business control. It's just a way of distributing profits, and that's not sufficient. You need to have real control over the direction things go. Are you describing the economic system known as supercapitalism? Yes. Okay, please tell me somebody found that interesting. Okay, whatever, you guys. We're moving on. I found it terrifying. That's fair. Would infinite growth be something to strive for under socialism, or are you a degrowther? Well, we don't need infinite growth for economic health if there are no investors, right? If everyone is a worker and people receive, assuming payment even exists, if they receive pay according to their work without a system of investment, you no longer need infinite growth because you no longer need an economy built around the needs of investors who would require economic growth in order to receive a return on their investment. Remember, if a business is stagnant, that is to say, it makes the exact same amount of money and does the same stuff year after year, workers in that business get paid. Investors don't. You understand? If you're talking about a proletarian state, a purely worker-run economy, stagnation is no longer a negative. You continue to churn the wheels of the economy even without growth. It is the investor who requires the growth in order to get anything, because, of course, the investor adds no value. The investor adds nothing but money with the investment, but they don't actually work or produce profits. They do not generate anything from the business in and of itself. There are, of course, investors who also work, and in that case, they're also a worker. If a socialist government made companies become worker co-ops, how do we prevent them from firing most of their employees and hiring independent contractors for most jobs they need done? I think it'd be pretty easy to design legislation that prevents the abuse of contract work. There are countries that already have that, even under capitalist systems. It also depends. You could do that pretty easily. I think that would be as simple as if a person works a given number of hours for your business, then they have to be brought in as like a proper member of the cooperative without differentiation from the other members or something. And then you could have that number be really low. Like if you're working more than 8 hours a week someplace. There's a million ways to solve that. That's a solvable problem. Why don't we burn money to curb inflation? Well, we kind of do. The Federal Reserve does destroy currency. Doesn't a stagnant economy still benefit shareholders because they get a cut of a company's profits? No, not necessarily. company profits aren't necessarily distributed back to the shareholder. It depends on a number of things. But if a corporation continues to make the same amount of money, like year in, year out, the investor invests by buying shares of the company, and the shares increase or decrease in value based on a market perception of future growth or not growth of that company. Meaning that the share value will stay the same even if the company continues to be profitable in its current place. It's really the stock price that matters there. That's why CEOs have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value for corporations, because profit and shareholder value aren't necessarily the same thing. They often correlate. A company that has high profits will be seen by the market to be doing well, so the value will increase, but it's not always the same, right? A good example of this would be Tesla. Tesla is a massively overevaluated company in the sense that it has an incredibly high share price, despite it not actually being that like productive or profitable, largely because people have such high hopes for it to be like the future of all technology, you know. But there's that separation between evaluation and profit. See, the profit is like an internal corporate thing. They use it to reinvest or to buy, you know, stuff to build materials and build new factories, whereas the evaluation is the shareholders playing their games. Do you think Tesla stock is a bubble? Yes. I don't know how long it'll take to burst, but I do think it will. Well, you might actually say it already has burst now that I'm looking at it. Remember the big dip? I remember. I think it could go down a lot further, personally. It's a long way down to go. Yeah, for sure. It should still be around here, IMO. So shareholders don't get profit directly, but they get control over how profits are used. It's complicated, but shareholders get their money by the increased value of the shares that they own for a company. So the shares have to be evaluated at a higher level than that which they bought in order for their money to increase. Shareholders also get to elect the board of shareholders, and they get to choose a CEO and some other things. Yeah, they can get returns and dividends as well, but like in terms of the money they get purely through their investment, yeah. Okay, we're moving on. I'm sorry. Hopefully this was useful to somebody. Can a company survive without investors? Yeah, there are tons of companies that haven't gone public. Companies usually go public because the owner wants to put themselves in the market so they can like have it sold or like make more money by getting investors. Investors do give money to the company after all.